You don't belong to this family anymore. Get out of my house." That sentence cut through the air like a knife as my daughter, Melissa, screamed it at me in her own home. I sat at her dining table, having just finished lunch after 3 hours of cooking, just as I'd done every Sunday for the past 2 years. I had brought bags of fresh groceries, paid for with my retirement money, only to be thrown out like a stranger. But I didn't stand up, and I didn't cry. While she kept yelling, her face red with anger, the same face I had known since she was a stubborn little girl back in Wisconsin, my mind had already started working. At 70, I understood that words can hurt, but actions decide everything. I already knew what I was going to do. That morning, I'd arrived at Melissa's suburban Chicago home at 11:30 a.m., just like every other Sunday. I rang the bell, carrying 2 heavy bags filled with fresh produce from the farmer's market. Ethan, her husband, opened the door without a greeting, simply stepping aside for me to enter. Melissa was sitting on the sofa, eyes glued to her phone, not even looking up. Only my granddaughter, Emma, ran over to hug me, her bright smile softening my heart. "Grandma, what did you bring that's yummy?" she asked. "I brought everything to make your favorite macaroni and cheese," I said. Her eyes lit up. I went straight to the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring sauce, turning on the stove just like every Sunday. I came, I cooked, I served, they ate, and I cleaned up. All with my own hands and my own money, but today was different. Melissa walked into the kitchen, frowning. "Mom, how many times have I told you Emma doesn't eat yellow peppers? Why don't you ever listen?" I explained. "Red peppers were nearly $10 a pound, honey." She scoffed and walked back to the sofa, scrolling on her phone the world where her mother only existed when she needed something. Then, Ethan chimed in, his voice sugar-coated with fake concern. "Mrs. Diane, I think you should sell that big house of yours. Living alone like that isn't safe. We could help you invest the money, it could grow." I kept stirring the sauce in silence. I had heard that concern 100 times before. They always had plans for my life, my money, my future, as if I were a child who couldn't decide for herself. But I remembered every word, every look. Meanwhile, Emma sat in the kitchen telling me about her new teacher and science projects. She was the only one who saw me as a person, not a walking ATM. I let her taste a piece of meat. She hugged me and whispered, "You cook better than Mom." I smiled, though my heart ached. When lunch was ready, I set the table in Melissa's dining room. She was still on her phone, and Ethan was watching TV. I quietly served the food, then sat in my usual chair, the stiff one facing the window. Halfway through the meal, Ethan started again. "Mrs. Diane, I have a cousin who's a great lawyer. We should set up a meeting about your will. It's better to get things organized now." Melissa looked up, her tone cold. "He's right, Mom. That way there won't be any trouble later." "Trouble?" "They were talking about my death as if it were a financial plan." I replied, "I already have my own lawyer. Everything's taken care of." Their faces tightened with irritation. They didn't want me in control of anything. They wanted it all, the power, the money, while I was supposed to depend on them. The air grew heavier when Emma accidentally spilled orange juice on the tablecloth. It was nothing, really, but Melissa exploded. "What are you doing? You're always so careless." Her voice was sharp, cruel. I couldn't take it anymore, and said gently, "Melissa, she's just a child. No need to be so harsh." She turned on me, eyes blazing. "You always take her side. You always contradict me in front of her. You just come here to make everything worse." The shouting filled the house. Emma burst into tears, and Ethan kept eating, pretending not to hear. I stood to comfort my granddaughter, but Melissa blocked my way. "Don't touch her. Stop spoiling her. I'm done with you and your constant criticism." A burden? I thought. Grocery shopping, cooking, cleaning, all paid for from my own pension, and that's called being a burden? And then, in that very moment, everything changed. Melissa jumped to her feet, pointed a finger in my face like I was a criminal, and screamed the words I will never forget. "You don't belong to this family anymore. Get out of my house." The room fell silent. Emma sobbed uncontrollably. Ethan kept eating, his eyes fixed on his plate as if nothing had happened. The daughter I raised with all my love, the one I worked myself to the bone for so she could have an education, was now throwing me out like a stranger. But instead of collapsing, something inside me stirred a strength I had forgotten I still possessed. I stood up slowly. I grabbed my purse, looked at my daughter one last time, and walked to the door without saying a word. From that moment on, the life of Diane Miller, a mother rejected by her own child, would never be the same again. Melissa kept yelling behind me, but I no longer heard her. In my mind, everything was already clear. The numbers, the appointments, the decisions I should have made long ago. Before opening the door, I turned around, looked straight into her eyes, and said in a calm voice that even surprised me, "Melissa, remember this day well. You didn't just lose your mother. You destroyed your own future." I left that house and closed the door gently, like closing a chapter of my life. Once I reached my car, I took out my phone and called my best friend. "Ruth," I said when she answered, "come with me tomorrow to the bank, and then to my lawyer's office. It's time I make some important changes." The next morning, I woke up at 6 a.m., not because of an alarm, but because at 70, my body wakes itself. I brewed a strong cup of coffee, opened the curtains, and looked at myself in the vanity mirror. "Diane Miller," I whispered, "it's time to remember who you really are." My small house in Springfield, Illinois, was so quiet I could hear the ticking of the clock. But it wasn't loneliness, it was peace. Peace in drinking my morning coffee without anyone telling me how to spend my money, how to live, or what to cook for whom. I turned on the TV for the morning news, then checked my phone. In my walking group chat, The Morning Glories, my 3 closest friends, Ruth, had just texted, "Good morning, lovely ladies. Who's walking at the park today?" Marjorie replied right away with a smiling face and a fire emoji. "I'm in. Gotta burn off all that garlic bread from last night." Glenda sent a photo of her healthy breakfast with a caption, "Ready to conquer the world, ladies." I wrote back, "See you at 8 a.m. at Washington Park. I've got big news to share." Ruth messaged me privately a moment later. "You okay, hun?" "You sounded upset yesterday." I replied simply, "Perfect. Better than ever." I put on my navy blue track pants with 2 white stripes, the ones I just bought from Target, my brand new sneakers, and the baseball cap my granddaughter Emma had given me for my birthday last year. I snapped a quick selfie in the mirror and posted it on Facebook with the caption, "Ready for a new day full of blessings." My 2018 Toyota Camry purred smoothly as I drove, despite Melissa's constant teasing that old people shouldn't be driving alone. I arrived at the park right at 8 a.m. Ruth, Marjorie, and Glenda were already waiting, each holding a water bottle and wearing bright smiles. "So, what happened yesterday?" Ruth asked as we started, walking along the lake trail. "You sounded serious on the phone." We walked in step, like we had for 3 years now, a promise to ourselves that aging would never defeat us. I told them everything, the insults, the cold stares, the shouting in Melissa's house. They listened silently, their faces tightening with anger. Marjorie spoke first. "Diane, that girl needs to learn a lesson she'll never forget." Glenda added, "Kids these days think parents owe them everything but never stop to realize they owe something back." Ruth squeezed my hand gently. "So, what are you going to do?" I smiled. "I'm going to show her her mother isn't foolish. Today I'm going to the bank and then to my lawyer. It's time she learned that every action has consequences." We finished our hour-long walk and rested under the trees. Watching other older women exercising around the park, I felt a surge of strength. Powerful, free, and finally true to myself. After saying goodbye to my friends, I stopped by Grace's hair salon, where Grace had been taking care of my hair for 15 years. "Oh my goodness, you look radiant today, Mrs. Diane," Grace said as she welcomed me into the chair. "Something special happening?" I smiled. "Let's just say I've got a few important meetings. I need to look my best." She laughed. "You always do. You're the kind of woman no one dares underestimate." While she was blow-drying my hair, I opened my banking app to check my accounts. Thank God. My husband Robert and I had always been careful planners. I had a solid retirement fund, lifelong savings, and a fully paid-off home. Melissa and Ethan liked to think I was an easy target, an old woman to be manipulated, but they couldn't be more wrong. I opened my contacts and found Mr. Frederick Evans, my trusted attorney. I called him while Grace painted my nails. "Hello, this is Diane Miller. I need to update a few details in my will. Could Ain't you see me this afternoon?" Mr. Evans's voice was kind but cautious. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Diane?" "Everything's fine," I said calmly. "I just want to make a few adjustments." "Would 4 p.m. work?" "Perfect," he replied. "I'll have everything ready." As I left the salon, Ruth arrived right on time as promised. "You look amazing," she said, "like a woman ready to conquer the world." We got in the car together and drove straight to the First National Bank of Springfield. At the counter, I asked to see the branch manager, Mr. Charles Howard, who had known me for over 10 years. He came out with his usual warm smile. "Mrs. Diane, what can I do for you today?" I said clearly. "I'd like to review all my accounts, investments, and make some important updates." He raised an eyebrow slightly. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Diane?" I smiled. "Not at all. I just want to make sure my money is exactly where I want it to be." We went over everything carefully, my savings, certificates of deposit, and checking accounts. Everything was in order, all under my name exactly as it should be. Before leaving, I said, "Mr. Howard, if anyone ever asks about my accounts or financial situation, even if they claim to be family, please don't share any information. Only I have access." He nodded seriously. "Of course, Mrs. Diane, your privacy is completely protected." Afterward, Ruth and I went to our favorite diner in downtown Springfield, a cozy, old-fashioned American place famous for its warm apple pie and hot coffee. "Are you sure about this?" Ruth asked as we split a slice of pie. "Absolutely," I said. "Melissa needs to learn that being a mother doesn't mean losing her dignity." I opened my phone and showed her the photos I had secretly taken the previous Sunday. Melissa scrolling on her phone while I cooked, Ethan watching TV while I set the table, Emma crying after being unfairly scolded by her mother. "These pictures remind me why I'm doing the right thing," I said. When I arrived at Mr. Evans' law office at 4 p.m. sharp, his assistant greeted me with a cup of coffee and led me inside. Mr. Evans, who had handled my legal affairs for nearly 20 years, welcomed me with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Diane, tell me what you need." I told him everything, how Melissa and Ethan had treated me, how they talked about my money as if it already belonged to them, how they disrespected me right in front of my granddaughter. He listened quietly, taking detailed notes without interrupting once. When I finished, he nodded. "I completely understand. Unfortunately, this kind of situation happens more often than people think. What changes would you like to make to your will?" I pulled out the sheet of paper I had written on the night before and placed it on his desk. "I want to change all the beneficiaries. Emma will still receive her share, but the rest will go to the people and organizations that truly value me." He reviewed my old will, marking the sections to revise. "Are you certain about this decision, Mrs. Diane? This is a major change." "I've never been more certain of anything," I said firmly. We spent 2 full hours working on the new will. Every sentence, every clause reflected exactly what I wanted. When it was done, I felt as if a huge weight had been lifted off my chest. "The documents will be ready to sign on Wednesday. We'll need 2 witnesses," Mr. Evans said. "I'll ask Ruth and my friends. They'll be happy to help." "Perfect. See you at 10 a.m., he replied. That evening I went home feeling like a completely new person. I made a light dinner, slipped into my favorite cotton pajamas, and watched a movie on Netflix. My phone kept ringing. Melissa was calling. I didn't answer. Not once, but 5 times in a row. Before going to bed, I opened my leather notebook and wrote, "Today, my new life begins." Today, Diane Miller decided she deserves respect. Tomorrow, Melissa will learn that being a mother doesn't mean letting your child trample your dignity. The following days passed in strange peace. Melissa called 5 times on Monday. 7 times on Tuesday. I didn't pick up a single one. It wasn't out of anger. It was because I finally understood something. I am not obligated to always be available for those who treat me badly, even if they share my blood. On Tuesday morning, as I sipped my coffee and scrolled through Facebook, I saw a new post from Melissa, a photo of her, Ethan, and Emma, smiling at the dining table. On the table were the dishes I had cooked. The caption read, "Sunday with family, so grateful for my perfect little home." Not a single mention of me, the one who bought the groceries, cooked the food, and cleaned up afterward, as if I had never existed. The phone rang. It was Ruth. "Did you see Melissa's post?" she asked. "I did," I said calmly. "Nothing surprises me anymore." Ruth sighed. "That girl really has no shame." I took a sip of coffee and smiled. All the better. She's showing everyone exactly who she is. We planned to meet at the park as usual, but before that, I needed to stop by First National Bank to sign some papers Mr. Howard had prepared. As I was getting dressed, the phone rang again. It was an unfamiliar number. I hesitated, then answered. "Mrs. Diane?" a young woman's voice said. "This is Jessica. I'm dating Tyler Ethan's cousin. May I speak with you for a moment?" I was surprised. Why would my son-in-law's cousin's girlfriend be calling me? "Of course, go ahead," I replied. Jessica lowered her voice, as if afraid someone might hear. "Mrs. Diane, I'm not sure if you know, but Ethan and Melissa have been talking to Tyler about borrowing money. They said you were giving them funds to open a store, but they needed some cash up front for a deposit." The blood drained from my face. "Borrow money? For what?" I asked coldly. Jessica hesitated, then whispered, "To open a clothing boutique." "But they've been telling everyone you already agreed," she continued, nervously. "Ethan said you'd already approved it, it's just that the bank is taking time to release the funds, because of your age." "My age?" I tightened my grip on the phone, as if being 70 meant being senile. "Jessica," I said steadily, "I've never spoken to them about any loan or business plan. How much did they say they needed?" Her answer made my stomach drop. $200,000. "Ethan said that kind of money was nothing to you, since you had so much saved up." I thanked Jessica for her honesty and asked her not to mention our conversation to Ethan or Melissa. When I hung up, my hands were shaking with fury. Not only had they disrespected me, they were now using my name to borrow money and promising others I would pay. I immediately called my attorney, Frederick Evans. "Mr. Evans," I said, "I need to sign the will earlier. Can we do it today instead of Wednesday?" His assistant replied, "The will is ready, Mrs. Diane. You can come any time." "Perfect," I said. "I'll be there in 2 hours." I called Ruth, Marjorie, and Glenda, explaining the urgent situation. All 3 agreed immediately to come with me as witnesses. "Those shameless people need to be stopped," Marjorie said firmly. Ruth added, "It's time you teach them that no one messes with the person who gave them life." On the way to the lawyer's office, my phone rang non-stop. Melissa kept calling and sending message after message on iMessage. "Mom, why aren't you answering? Are you okay? I'm worried. If you don't respond, I'm coming over. Mom, please don't be so sensitive. Everyone has bad days." Bad days? Humiliating your mother in front of her. Grandchild is a bad day? Treating her like a maid is just a moment of frustration? Using her name to borrow money? No big deal? I smirked coldly. Attorney Evans greeted me with his usual professionalism. We went over the new will, line by line. The part for Emma, my granddaughter, remained untouched. She was completely innocent. But everything else changed. The house that Melissa and Ethan coveted most, it would be donated to a foundation that helps abandoned elderly women. My savings and investments divided among charities that genuinely make a difference in the community, and a portion would go to Ruth, my dear friend who had stood by me through every storm. "Mr. Evans looked at me over his silver-rimmed glasses. "Are you absolutely sure about these changes, Mrs. Diane?" "I've never been more certain of anything," I replied. "I want my money to go to people who value it and use it for good." I signed each page with an odd sense of calm. Ruth, Marjorie, and Glenda signed as witnesses. When we finished, they hugged me tightly. "I admire you so much," Glenda said. "I wish more women had your strength." After leaving the office, we stopped by a small cafe nearby. I had just taken a sip of cappuccino when the phone rang. It was a landline number. I answered. Ethan's voice came through. "Hi, Mrs. Diane, sorry to bother you, but Melissa's really worried since you haven't answered your phone. Are you all right?" His tone was syrupy, sweet, fake, as always. "Everything's just perfect, Ethan," I replied. "What do you need?" "Well, ma'am," he said cheerfully, "we wanted to talk to you about a great business opportunity. It could benefit the whole family." "Ah, of course. Not worried about me, worried about my money." "What kind of opportunity?" I asked smoothly, though I already knew. Ethan sounded excited. A clothing boutique, Mrs. Diane. Amazing location, busy shopping area. We just need the initial capital. How much in total? I asked, pretending to be interested. 200,000. But don't worry, it's a safe investment. You'll see returns in 6 months. Exactly what Jessica had said. Ethan, I said gently, that sounds interesting. Why don't you and Melissa come to my house tomorrow? Bring the business plan and all the documents. I'd like to go over everything carefully. His voice trembled with excitement. Yes, ma'am. What time works best for you? 3 p.m. Sounds perfect. Great. I'll tell Melissa she'll be thrilled. I hung up, smiling. Ruth looked at me curiously. You're not really going to give them the money, are you? Of course not, I said, still smiling. But tomorrow, they're going to learn a lesson they'll never forget. That night, I went home and prepared everything for the next day. I made copies of the new will, printed out the nasty messages Melissa had sent me, and gathered all the grocery and ingredient receipts, proof that for 2 years, I had been the one paying for every family meal. I took out the small voice recorder I usually use to save notes from my doctor's appointments, charged it fully, and placed it on the coffee table in the living room. Tomorrow, I would record the entire conversation, because I knew exactly what would happen. Melissa and Ethan would deny everything. They'd say I was old, confused, and misunderstood. Before going to bed, I wrote in my journal, tomorrow, Melissa and Ethan will learn that their mother is not the foolish old woman they think she is. They will learn that every action has consequences, and that respect isn't something you beg for, but something you must earn. I slept soundly, more peacefully than ever. For the first time in months, I felt in control of my own life again. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. Exactly at 3 p.m., Melissa and Ethan knocked on my door. I had already seen them through the living room window. They looked more like salespeople than children visiting their mother. Melissa carried a brand new pink folder, and Ethan held a laptop. Both wore bright smiles and formal clothes, as if heading to a business meeting. How ironic. Melissa gave me a light kiss on the cheek, pretending last Sunday had never happened. Mom, you look great. Feeling better? She said, her voice soft as air. As if the problem had been a simple cold and not the humiliation she'd made me endure in front of Emma. Ethan hugged me with that same fake warmth that always made my skin crawl. Thank you for seeing us, Mrs. Diane. We're so excited to share this opportunity with you. They sat on my living room sofa like it was their own house. Ethan immediately opened his laptop. Would you two like some coffee? I asked, wearing the sweetest smile of a polite hostess. Melissa answered absently, her eyes glued to the papers. Yes, thanks, Mom. But don't go to any trouble. This won't take long. Don't go to any trouble. As if serving them was such a burden. I went into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and discreetly turned on the digital voice recorder. I placed it neatly between the napkins on the tray. Every word they said today would be recorded forever. When I came back, Ethan already had a slideshow pulled up on the screen. Take a look at this, Mrs. Diane, he said, pointing at the display. This is the shop layout. It's downtown, near several colleges, perfect for young customers. Melissa pulled a few papers from her pink folder, speaking in the cheerful tone of a telemarketer. Mom, here are all the numbers. The initial investment is $200,000, but just look at these potential profits. She held up some charts that looked like a child had drawn them, fake curves, imaginary figures. That sounds interesting, I said calmly, taking a sip of coffee. But why do you need me to invest? Can't you get a bank loan? They exchanged nervous glances. Well, banks are complicated. Too much paperwork, high interest rates? Ethan stammered. Melissa quickly jumped in, sugar dripping from her tone. Besides, Mom, we thought it would be so meaningful if this were a family business. You'd be a partner, not just an investor. A partner? I thought. As if I'd have any real control. So what guarantee do I have? I asked. Ethan started to sweat. Guarantee? Mrs. Diane, we're family. Our word should be enough. Melissa nodded vigorously, pretending to be offended. Mom, since when do you need a written guarantee from your own daughter? Since the day you screamed that I no longer belong to this family, I thought but said nothing. Instead, I continued calmly, have you done any market research? Do you know how many clothing stores are already in that area? Ethan hesitated. We glanced at it, but our idea is totally different. And if the business fails? I asked. How would you repay the money to me then? Melissa began to lose her patience. Mom, you're always so negative. This will absolutely succeed. They had no backup plan, no calculations, just dreams and my money. I changed my tone soft but sharp. Melissa, after what happened last Sunday, I'm honestly surprised you still came here to ask for money. Her face paled, but she forced a smile. Oh, Mom, I told you everyone has bad days. Don't hold a grudge anymore. A grudge? I looked straight at her. You yelled in my face, kicked me out of your house, and now you're asking for $200,000 as if nothing ever happened? Ethan quickly cut in. Mrs. Diane, every family has disagreements. What matters is knowing how to move past them. Melissa sighed dramatically. All right, Mom, I'm sorry about that day. You know I get short-tempered when I'm stressed, but that has nothing to do with business. A fake apology, just another way to ask for money. You know what? I said, standing up, my voice calm. Let me think about it. It's a large amount and I need to be sure. Melissa's face went pale. Mom, we've been preparing for a month. The property owner needs an answer this week. Ethan closed his laptop, trying to hide his irritation. Mrs. Diane, this opportunity won't last forever. If we don't act fast, someone else will take it. Pressure. They always use pressure when they couldn't get their way. I understand, I said evenly. But $200,000 isn't pocket change. I'll need to talk to my attorney and review my finances. Melissa jumped up, her voice sharp. An attorney? For what? We're family. Exactly because we're family, I replied. I want everything done properly. If we're partners, there needs to be a clear contract to protect everyone. Ethan stood too, struggling to stay composed. Mrs. Diane, I think you're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Melissa began gathering the papers, her tone now openly annoyed. Mom, sometimes I feel like you just don't trust us. After everything you've done to me, I said coldly, what have you ever done for me besides turning me into your weekend maid? Melissa said nothing, her eyes downcast. Ethan mumbled something vague about care and visits, but couldn't name a single example. Fine, Melissa said quickly. Take your time, but don't wait too long. Opportunities don't wait for anyone. They turned to leave, suddenly cold and distant, so different from their sweet act earlier. Wait, I called after them. Have you told anyone else that I agreed to invest? Ethan replied immediately. No, of course not, Mrs. Diane. It's just between us. Lies. Perfect. I smiled. It would be embarrassing if you'd promised my money before I'd even agreed. I walked them to the door, keeping the same fake smile they'd given me. When the door closed, I sat down, turned off the recorder. Everything had been captured, their lies, their lack of preparation, their emotional manipulation, and how they saw me only as a walking wallet. I immediately called Ruth. How did it go? She asked. Exactly as I expected, I replied. Tomorrow, I'll call them back with my final answer, and it's one they'll never forget. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I had made up my mind. This Thursday would be the day Diane Miller reclaimed control of her life. I ate breakfast slowly, put on my favorite navy blue suit, the one that made me feel powerful, and drove off with more calm and confidence than I'd felt in years. First stop, First National Bank. Mr. Howard, the branch manager, welcomed me into his private office, as always. Mrs. Diane, how can I help you today? I need to make a few important changes to my accounts, I said. I want to change all my passwords, update beneficiaries, and add new security measures. Mr. Howard took careful notes. Is there a particular issue, ma'am? I told him about Jessica's phone call and how Melissa and Ethan had used my name to borrow money. I want to make sure no one can access my information or use my name without written authorization. Of course, he said seriously. We'll change all your access codes and set up a special alert for your account. If your name comes up in any financial transaction, we'll call you immediately for confirmation. Perfect, I replied. I also withdrew a fairly large amount of cash not to spend, but to have ready for my plan. Mr. Howard processed everything quickly without asking questions. Would you like any documents with that? Just the latest account statement, I said. Leaving the bank, I drove to Attorney Frederick Evans's office to pick up the notarized copy of my new will. His secretary handed me a sealed envelope. Mr. Evans said everything is complete. Your old will has been officially revoked, she said. Next stop, Ruth's house. I needed my best friend by my side for what I was about to do. I found her watering her roses in the yard. Ready for the big performance? She asked with a mischievous grin. All set, I replied. Come with me back to my place. I'm about to call Melissa. Ruth pulled off her gardening gloves right away. Oh, I wouldn't miss this for the world. I've been waiting for the day you'd give them a real lesson. We drove back to my house, chatting the whole way. Once there, I prepared everything like it was a formal business meeting. Spread out the tablecloth, brought out the finest teacups, arranged all the documents neatly, the copy of the new will, receipts from those Sunday dinners, and a transcript of yesterday's recording. Are you nervous? Ruth asked as she adjusted the chairs. Not at all, I said. Actually, I feel relieved. For the first time in years, I'll say exactly what I mean without fear of the consequences. Ruth hugged me gently. I'm really proud of you, Diane. At 2 p.m., I called Melissa. She picked up right away. Mom, have you thought more about the investment? She asked eagerly. Yes, honey, I've made my decision. You and Ethan should come over. I have a few things to discuss. Of course. How about in an hour? Perfect. I'll see you at 3 o'clock. Can you at least tell me what you decided? I pretended the call was breaking up. Hello? Hello? Then I hung up, smiling. Ruth looked at me, eyes wide with excitement. What do you think they'll do? Pouring another cup of coffee, I said in a steady voice. They'll get angry. They'll say I've gone crazy, that someone's influencing me, that I don't know what I'm doing. But this time, I couldn't care less. Exactly, at 3 p.m. The doorbell rang. Melissa looked relaxed, even bringing a bottle of champagne. To celebrate our partnership, Mom. Ethan held a bouquet. For the best mother-in-law in the world. They both smiled sweetly, the kind of smile reserved for people they're about to take advantage of. Come in, I said formally. I've been expecting you. In the living room, Ruth was already seated. Melissa hesitated slightly when she saw her. Oh, hi, miss. Ruth, I didn't know you'd be here. Ruth smiled calmly. Diane invited me to be a witness. Ethan frowned. A witness? For what? I gestured toward the dining room, where everything was perfectly arranged. A white tablecloth, documents stacked neatly, and a brown envelope placed right in the center. A witness to today's conversation, I said slowly, because it involves my money and I want everything to be clear. Melissa and Ethan sat down across from me, still clutching the champagne and flowers, trying to look confident. So, Mom, Melissa began, her voice full of anticipation. What have you decided? I looked her straight in the eyes. My decision is no. A sudden silence fell over the room. Melissa blinked rapidly. No. What? No investment, I said deliberately. I will not give $200,000. Diane, may I ask why? Of course, I said, then produced the notebook of notes and the transcript of yesterday's recording. First, I said, firmly, yesterday you lied. Ethan said you hadn't told anyone about my investment, but I know you promised others. And now I have proof. Both their faces immediately went pale. Second, I continued, pulling out a thick stack of receipts. For 2 years I have been spending my money, every Sunday to buy groceries and cook for you while being treated like a servant. These are all the receipts, more than $20,000 out of my pocket. Melissa hurried to interrupt. Mom, we never asked you to. I held up my hand for silence. Third, I said, producing the photos I'd taken secretly on Sundays. These pictures clearly show how you treat me in your own home. Ethan watching TV while I cook, you glued to your phone, ignoring everyone while Emma cries after you scold her. And finally, I said, pulling a brown envelope containing the new will from my jacket pocket. Last Sunday you told me I was no longer part of this family, told me to leave the house. Well then, daughter, I followed that advice. I opened the envelope and spread the notarized copies of the will on the table. This is the new will, signed and notarized yesterday. Emma still keeps her share, she's innocent. But everything else, including this house, will be given to charities and people who truly value me." Melissa jumped up, knocking a chair over. "You can't do that. That's my inheritance." "I'm your only daughter." Ethan sat frozen, staring at the pile of papers as if at a death sentence. "Inheritance?" I stood and looked at her. "And the love and respect I gave you were part of that inheritance, but you threw them away last Sunday. Actions have consequences." "You're crazy," Melissa shouted. "Ruth put these ideas in your head. The neighbors will think you've lost your mind." Ruth stood, calm but with a tone like a blade. "Diane is more clear-headed than ever, young lady. The only thing she has lost is the patience to tolerate your rudeness." Ethan finally spoke, voice wavering. "Mrs. Diane, this is insane. You can't make such a big decision out of anger." "Anger?" I raised an eyebrow. 2 years of being belittled, insulted, treated like a maid, and you call that a moment of anger? I walked to the door and threw it wide open. "You're right about one thing. I no longer belong to your family. Because a real family wouldn't treat their mother this way. A real family doesn't see their mother as an ATM. Melissa ran after me, tears of rage streaming. "You'll die alone. No one will take care of you. You'll regret this." I turned to look at her one last time. "Daughter, I'd rather die alone with dignity than live surrounded by people who only count my money." I pointed to the door. "Now get out of my house. And don't come back until you learn to respect the woman who gave you life." They stormed off in fury. Ethan muttered words I didn't bother to hear. When the door closed, Ruth and I stood in silence for a few seconds. Then she burst into applause and whooped. "Perfect, Diane. Absolutely brilliant." We hugged each other tightly. For the first time in many years, I felt completely free. The next morning, Friday. That was the day I usually went to Grace's beauty salon, the woman who'd taken care of my hair for nearly 15 years. I arrived earlier than usual. I wanted to look put together for what I was about to do next. Grace looked at me through the mirror and smiled brightly. "You look amazing today, Diane. Something good happen?" I smiled, my tone calm but full of meaning. "Let's just say I've finally gotten my life back in order." As Grace was blow-drying my hair, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Melissa had started her call campaign since 7 a.m. There were even messages from unknown numbers, probably people she asked to call and pressure me. I didn't answer a single one. While doing my nails, Grace asked, "Are you all right, Diane? My sister lives in the same neighborhood as your daughter. She said it was loud over there yesterday, sounded like a big argument." I gave a faint smile and briefly told her what had happened. Grace shook her head, sympathetically. "Kids these days have no respect anymore. You did the right thing, Diane. Sometimes you have to stand up and remind them who raised them." Leaving the salon, I stopped by the shopping mall where Ruth worked at a clothing store. It was a busy Friday afternoon. As soon as she saw me, Ruth waved. "How are you feeling this morning after everything yesterday?" "Better than ever," I replied, feeling light as air. "Did you tell our walking group yet?" "Yeah, they were thrilled. Mary said she wishes she had the courage to stand up to her daughter-in-law like I did." We both laughed. Turns out family cracks aren't anyone's secret alone. As I was browsing a few new scarves, a familiar face walked into the store. Jessica, the girlfriend of Ethan's cousin. The young woman looked uneasy. "Mrs. Diane, may I speak with you privately for a moment?" Ruth stepped back behind the counter so we could talk. "Of course, Jessica," I said. "What's going on?" She glanced around, then lowered her voice. "Ma'am," Tyler said, "Ethan was furious yesterday. He said you'd gone crazy, canceled everything because your friends were influencing you." A chill ran down my spine. The smear campaign had begun. "What else did he say?" I asked evenly. Jessica hesitated, then continued, speaking barely above a whisper. "He said they're going to protect you legally, meaning they plan to have you declared mentally incompetent so they can control your assets." I gripped my purse tightly. Shameless. They were trying to steal my rights through the law. Taking a deep breath, I smiled and thanked her. "Thank you, Jessica. If you hear anything else, please let me know." Jessica nodded and smiled softly. "Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to say I think you're perfectly fine. Honestly, this is the most confident I've ever seen you." Ruth and I immediately left the mall and headed straight to attorney Frederick Evans's office. His secretary said he was in court but promised to notify him right away. About half an hour later he came out, still in his familiar gray suit. "Mrs. Diane, what's the emergency?" I told him everything about Ethan's threat that they were planning to declare me incompetent to gain control of my assets. His expression turned serious instantly. "This is very serious, Mrs. Diane. We need to act right away," Mr. Evans explained. "Ethan and Melissa could file a petition asking the court to evaluate your mental capacity. We'll need to do 3 things immediately. First, get a medical certificate confirming you're fully competent. Second, register your new will with the county court. Third, create a legal protection file in case they try to interfere." We left his office and went straight to the private hospital where I had insurance. Dr. Richard Hill, who'd been my physician for more than 10 years, welcomed me as soon as he heard it was urgent. "Mrs. Diane," he said with a kind smile, "you're the most clear-headed patient I've ever met." He ran a series of cognitive, memory, and psychological reflex tests. Everything was perfect. "You're completely competent," Dr. Hill concluded. "I'll issue a full medical certificate. Any judge who reviews it will clearly see that you're fully capable of managing your assets." I thanked him and left the hospital, feeling relieved but also ready for the next step. Saturday morning, I decided to do something I hadn't done in a long time: have breakfast alone at a small cafe on Main Street. As I was enjoying a warm slice of cheesecake, a familiar voice came from behind me. "Diane, what a surprise to see you here." I looked up. It was Helen, Melissa's godmother, and once one of my closest friends. She sat down without even asking. "Melissa called me yesterday," she said with a sigh. "She's very worried about you," she told me. "Everything that happened." So, the soft attack had begun. I took a sip of coffee and asked calmly, "What exactly did she tell you, Helen?" Helen sighed, her tone dripping with that fake pity only people who love drama can master. "She said you two argued and you overreacted, that you changed your will out of anger, and that your friends have been putting ideas in your head." "And what do you think, Helen?" I asked. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Diane, I've known you for over 30 years. You're smart, but at our age, sometimes emotions take over, and we do things we regret." I set my coffee cup down and looked her straight in the eye. "Helen, did you know Melissa screamed in my face that I no longer belonged in her family? Did you know that for the past 2 years, every Sunday I've been cooking and cleaning for her like a maid? And did you know that she and her husband used my name to borrow money without my permission?" Helen's face changed immediately. "No, Melissa didn't tell me any of that. I told her everything, every detail. From the conversation at the house, to the recording, to how they tried to manipulate me. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long moment before exhaling softly. I had no idea things were that bad. The saddest part, I said, is that Melissa cares more about the money she lost than about the mother she's hurt. She hasn't once offered a sincere apology. She just wants things to go back to normal, as if nothing ever happened." Helen stood up and paid for the coffee. "Diane, I'll talk to Melissa. This can't go on like this." I watched her leave the cafe, knowing that at least today, someone finally understood me. Sunday, I decided not to sit at home waiting for the call I knew would come. Instead, I went for a walk in the park with Ruth and Mary. Then we had lunch at a new restaurant in town. We had just ordered when my phone rang just as I expected. It was Melissa. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm at your house." "I'm having lunch with friends," I replied firmly. "Can you come home? It's really important." I told her she could wait or come back another day. "Mom, please." "I brought Emma. She wants to see you." Ah, the same old trick, using my granddaughter to tug at my heart. "Melissa," I said slowly and clearly, "Emma is always welcome at my home, but if you came here just to continue insulting me, you'd better go back." There was a long silence, then her voice softened. "I didn't come to fight. I just want to talk, like adults." "Fine," I said. "I'll be home in an hour." I went on enjoying my lunch peacefully this time. She was the one who had to wait. When I drove home, they were already sitting outside the gate. Emma saw me and ran over, wrapping her arms tightly around my legs. "Grandma, I missed you so much." My heart softened in that moment. Melissa sat there, her expression unreadable somewhere between regret and calculation. "Come inside," I said. "This time, we'll talk my way in my house, under my rules." Emma held my hand as we walked in. "Grandma," she asked softly, "Mom said you're mad at us. Is that true?" Looking at that worried little face, my heart ached. "No, sweetheart, Grandma's not mad at you. I'm just sad that sometimes grown-ups don't behave the way they should." Melissa sat down on the sofa, her hands clasped tightly together, the same timid posture I hadn't seen since she was a teenager. "Mom," she began, "I came because we need to fix this. Emma doesn't understand why you don't come over on Sundays anymore." I turned gently to my granddaughter. "Emma, honey, do you remember what happened last Sunday?" She nodded sadly. "Yes. Mom yelled at you, and you left." "Emma, sweetheart." "I," said softly, "go to the kitchen and get some milk. There's strawberry jelly in the fridge that I bought for you." Once she left, I turned back, my voice colder than ever. "Do you have anything you'd like to say?" Melissa lowered her head, her voice growing smaller. "Mom, I was just so stressed that day. I wasn't thinking when I said those things. At least it was some form of acknowledgement, though, far too late. Ethan was having problems at work, Emma was being difficult, and then you came in with that attitude, always criticizing everything," she explained. I folded my arms and asked coolly, "What attitude?" "The attitude of defending my granddaughter when you yelled at her for spilling orange juice? Was that my great sin?" Melissa sighed, avoiding my gaze. "It's not just that, Mom. You always make me feel like I don't know how to raise my own child." I looked at her, feeling both pain and disappointment. "Do you know why you feel that way, Melissa? Because deep down, you know you're wrong, and instead of fixing it, you choose to blame everyone else." Just then, Emma came back, holding her glass of milk, and sat down between us. "So, are you and Mom friends again?" she asked hopefully. Melissa and I exchanged a glance. "We're talking, sweetheart," I said gently. "Mom," Melissa continued, "I know I was wrong. I know I hurt you. But changing the whole will like that was too much." And there it was, the real issue. She didn't care about the pain she'd caused. She only cared about the money she'd lost. "Melissa," I said slowly, "the will is just the consequence. The real problem is how you treat me, how you see me only as someone to use when you need something." Emma watched us, not fully understanding, but feeling the heavy tension in the room. Melissa leaned toward me, her tone softening. "All right, I admit I was disrespectful, but Mom, we're family, and family is supposed to forgive." She had used the word forgive, the magic word she thought could erase everything, without any real change behind it. "Do you remember?" I said. "When your father died, I was completely alone. You promised you'd never leave me, that we'd always be there for each other." Melissa's face softened a little. "Mom, I've always been there for you. Been there for me." I looked at her, incredulous. "Melissa, for the past 2 years, you haven't visited me once without a reason. You never come just to check in, to talk, to share a cup of tea. You only show up when you need money or when you want me to babysit Emma." Emma looked up, her eyes wide. "Is that true, Mom?" Melissa hesitated. "Emma, grown-up things are complicated." The little girl turned to me. "Grandma, is that why you don't come to our house on Sundays anymore? Because Mom doesn't visit you?" Before I could answer, the phone rang. It was Ruth. "Diane," she said, "I'm calling because Ethan just stopped by the store asking about you. He told my boss that you were sick and that the whole family was very worried." At the mention of his name, Melissa's face turned pale. I asked Ruth, "What did you say to him?" She replied, "I told him I saw you yesterday looking perfectly healthy and even happy, but be careful, my friend. He's been saying strange things about you." I hung up and stared at Melissa for a long moment. "Where is Ethan?" I asked. She hesitated. "He's at his cousin's law office." My heart went cold. "What lawyer?" Melissa stayed silent. "Melissa, what lawyer?" "Finally," she admitted, her voice trembling. "The lawyer who's helping us prove that you're no longer mentally capable." "Mom, everyone's just worried about you. You changed your will so suddenly. You've been ignoring calls, acting differently." Emma looked frightened, her voice shaking. "Grandma, are you sick?" Melissa quickly stroked her daughter's hair. "No, sweetheart. Grandma's just a little confused." "Confused?" I repeated to myself, trembling with rage. So that was their plan, to turn me into a senile old woman manipulated by her friends. I stood up, walked to my bedroom, opened the closet, and pulled out a neatly prepared folder, my full medical file. It contained every psychological test, the certification from Dr. Richard Hill, and confirmations from 2 other physicians stating I was completely sound of mind. I placed the stack of papers on the table right in front of Melissa. "This is what your husband will see when he tries to declare me incompetent. Every medical test, psychological evaluation, and certification from 3 different doctors, all confirming that I am perfectly sane." Melissa's eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, her voice trembling. "Mom, when did you do all this?" I crossed my arms. "After Jessica warned me about your plan. Melissa, you and Ethan left me no choice. If you can't respect my decision, then you'll be forced to respect it by law." The phone rang again. This time it was Attorney Frederick Evans. "Mrs. Diane," he said, "I just received a call from another attorney asking about your mental capacity. I made it clear that you have formal legal representation and that all contact must go through me." I thanked him and hung up. "You hear that?" I said, looking straight at Melissa. "Your husband is trying to take away my rights, and that's his idea of love?" Melissa jumped up, her voice panicked. "Mom, we're just trying to protect you." "Protect me from what?" I shouted, for the first time in my life not holding back. "From making my own decisions? From choosing how to spend my own money? From deciding who I love and who I respect?" The room fell into a heavy silence. Emma clutched her glass of milk, tears welling in her eyes, and I, for the first time in my life, was no longer afraid of losing my daughter, because I knew I had just reclaimed myself. Emma began to cry when she saw my anger. I immediately calmed down and held her tightly. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups get too loud." The little girl wrapped her arms around my neck, sobbing. "Grandma, please don't be sad." My heart tightened. She didn't deserve to witness any of this. "Melissa," I said, my voice firmer than ever, "you have 2 choices. 1, tell Ethan to stop all legal actions immediately and apologize to me sincerely. 2, this will be the last time you ever step foot in this house with Emma." Melissa froze. "Are you forbidding me from bringing Emma here?" I made myself clear. Emma is always welcome, but I won't allow anyone to use my granddaughter as a tool for manipulation. I walked to the door. "Think carefully. This time, there's no going back. Either you respect me as your mother, or you leave me in peace forever." I opened the door calmly. "Now go. I have more important things to do." Melissa hugged Emma tightly, crying as she walked out. The little girl sobbed, "Why can't I stay with Grandma a little longer?" When they were gone, I sat down on the sofa and broke into tears, not from sadness, but from relief. At last, everything was laid out clear and final. Monday morning, I woke up with a strange sense of peace, not the peace of someone who had won, but the calm of someone who had finally taken back control of her own life. As I was sipping my coffee, the phone rang. It was Attorney Frederick Evans. "Mrs. Diane, I have good news," he said. "Your son-in-law's attorney has officially withdrawn all legal proceedings." After we presented the medical results and the valid power of attorney, they realized there was nothing more they could do. I felt relieved, though not surprised. Ethan only acted when I thought he had the upper hand. "So that means they can't do anything now, right?" I asked. "Exactly," he replied. "All your documents are valid, your mental fitness is medically certified, and your will remains fully enforceable." After breakfast, I went to the park as usual. Ruth, Mary, and Helen were already waiting. "How do you feel after all this?" Ruth asked. "Free," I smiled. "Completely free." Mary walked beside me and whispered, "My daughter ran into Melissa at the supermarket yesterday. She said Melissa looked awful, dark circles, probably didn't sleep all night." I didn't feel happy, but I didn't feel pity either. Every decision comes with a price. As we walked, I told them about the call from my lawyer. Helen clapped her hands. "Finally, those people learned they can't manipulate everyone forever." Mary smiled. Diane, you're an inspiration to all of us. So many women our age need the kind of courage you've shown. After our walk, I went to the nursing home where I volunteer twice a week. Mrs. Carroll, the director, greeted me with her familiar smile. Diane, the residents are waiting for you. They're so excited for today's class. I teach them basic tech skills, how to use WhatsApp to text their kids, make video calls, scroll through Facebook. Mrs. Diane, said 80-year-old Eleanor, laughing, my grandkids can't believe I know how to send a message with emojis. Seeing those bright smiles warmed my heart in a way I hadn't felt for years. You've changed our lives, said Mrs. Ruthie. Before, we felt cut off from the world. In the middle of class, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. Grandma, it's me, Emma. Mom let me use her phone to text you. I miss you so much. Can I come visit you? My heart skipped a beat. My little girl had learned to text. I replied right away, Of course, sweetheart. When would you like to see Grandma? The reply came quickly. Mom said whenever you want, she'll bring me over and pick me up exactly at the time you say. That afternoon when I got home, there was a brown envelope at my doorstep, handwritten with my name. I opened it. It was a letter from Melissa. Mom, the letter began, it's been 3 months, and each day I understand more about the pain I've caused. She wrote that she'd been going to therapy. The doctor helped me realize that I've always taken your love for granted as an entitlement, not a gift. I folded the letter, tears falling onto the table. Not out of anger or regret, but because, for the first time, Melissa was finally beginning to understand. I kept reading. I'm not writing this letter to ask you to come back into my life. I'm writing to tell you that you were right about everything. Ethan and I are getting a divorce. I've realized he only wanted your money, and I only wanted what you could do for me. Neither of those things was real love. I froze, my hands trembling slightly. The letter ended with lines that made my heart tighten. Emma misses you every single day. If you allow it, I'd like to bring her to visit you, no conditions. Not to make you come back to me, but because a child deserves her grandmother. And a grandmother like you deserves to be loved unconditionally. I sat in the living room, quietly reading the letter again and again. Melissa's tone was different now, calmer, remorseful, more mature. But I had learned one thing. Don't trust words, trust actions. I called Ruth and told her about the letter. What are you going to do? She asked. I'm going to see Emma, I replied. But at my house, and on my terms, Ruth agreed over the phone. The little girl isn't at fault. You're doing the right thing. I texted Melissa. You can bring Emma on Saturday at 2 o'clock. Leave her here and come back to pick her, up at 5. The response came immediately. Perfect, Mom, thank you. Saturday, they arrived right on time. Melissa looked different, thinner, dark circles under her eyes, but her tone and expression were calmer. Hi, Mom, she said, not trying to hug me. Thank you for letting me bring Emma. Her attitude was gentle, almost humble. Emma ran up and threw her arms around me. Grandma, I missed you so much. I lifted her up, holding her close. I missed you too, sweetheart. Melissa stood watching, a faint, bittersweet smile on her face. I'll be back at 5. If you need anything, just text me. That afternoon, Emma and I had a wonderful time. We baked cookies, watched a movie, and laughed together. Grandma, Emma asked while putting the tray in the oven, why don't Mom and Dad live together anymore? I chose the gentlest words. Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices so they can be happier, sweetheart. Are you happy, Grandma? She asked, her voice innocent. I smiled, my eyes warm. Yes, sweetheart. Happier than ever. Emma grinned brightly. I know, you look prettier when you smile, for real. At exactly 5 p.m., Melissa came back. Was she good, Mom? As always, I replied. Emma hugged me tightly. Grandma, can I come again next Saturday? Of course, sweetheart, I smiled. As they left, I stood at the gate watching the sunset, the warm orange light stretching across the small path leading to the park. A text came from Ruth. How did it go? I replied. Perfect. Emma is still the greatest joy of my life. That night, before going to bed, I opened the brown leather journal I had kept since my first days living alone. I wrote, Today, I confirmed something I've known for a long time. I can love Emma without having to endure Melissa's disrespect. I can be a grandmother without being a victim. I set the pen down and looked out the window, where the city lights shimmered through the glass. I thought about everything that had happened over the past few months, the pain, the betrayal, and the freedom I had reclaimed. I had regained my dignity, independence, and joy for life. I had learned that true love can't be begged for or bargained with. It exists only when it is given freely. Finally, after so many years, I understood that I have the right to choose who deserves my love. I can give love but never again lose myself in the process. And for the first time in a very long while, I felt completely happy. This story is a work of fiction inspired by real experiences, with names and places changed to protect privacy. Every family loves differently, but sometimes that love becomes clouded by pride, ingratitude, or old wounds left unhealed. Like Diane, some choose silence and endurance, while others stand up and speak the truth not for revenge, but to reclaim their dignity. What would you choose when love and self-respect no longer walk the same path? No matter how many trials life brings, God always gives us the strength to forgive, to heal, and to begin again with peace in our hearts. Thank you for watching until the end. Click on the 2 videos showing on your screen. Each one carries a lesson about faith, courage, and unconditional love.